Thank you, Mr. Comptroller, and welcome to Old Line Government Affairs. We appreciate you doing this today. For everyone that's watching today, I'm American Joe Metashevsky, the Government Affairs Director, and joining me is Brett Leininger, Managing Director. Comptroller Franchot, thank you for hosting this virtual roundtable discussion. We appreciate it very much. You know, Mr. Comptroller, you and I have been friends for a long time, since I guess 1987. We served together as members of the House of Delegates. Throughout your career, you've built an impressively solid reputation for being honest and accessible. 20 years in the House and now 14 years as Maryland's Comptroller. It's a pretty remarkable track record. And as our state's Chief Fiscal Officer, your favorability is sky high. Your staff answers the phone within 40 seconds. You ensure that Maryland taxpayers get their refund with lightning speed. Maryland enjoys a AAA bond rating. And just as importantly, the men and women that you have chosen to serve the citizens of Maryland, they're top shelf. I mean, they are exceedingly qualified, and I can speak to that from personal experience. So if you can just bear with us for a second before we get to you, I just want to talk about you just a little bit more from our perspective. You know, as a result of everything that you've done to make your office top notch, you enjoy a broad spectrum of support, which is well deserved. What impresses me the most, though, about your broad support is that it also runs deep. I, for one, have witnessed it. I've attended your events. They're always filled wall to wall. In addition to the lawyers and the doctors and the business executives, your gatherings include people from all walks of life. Those who feed us, repair our cars, fix our plumbing, the list goes on and on. They're young and old. And I want to applaud you. I looked at your website I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed you're giving back as a comptroller to the people you represent. There is an extensive list on your website of all the businesses that offer, well, first of all the businesses in the state of Maryland, but those who offer curbside delivery and pickup. And I want to say that is just so good. It's good for the businesses, and it's good for the consumers who are looking for that information. My hat off to you for doing that. So today, let me thank you again for extending your hand to us and sharing some of your time under these particularly socially challenging circumstances. So again, Mr. Comptroller, thanks for being with us. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm going to turn it over to Brett Leininger, and then we'll get into the Q&A and let everybody have at it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Before maybe I get into questions, would love the opportunity for you to just say some opening remarks, anything that's on your mind, and then we can dive into the questions.
Well, thank you, Brett, and you know, that was an undeserved introduction by American Joe Metashevsky, my favorite delegate, senator, former senator, and former gubernatorial candidate. I listened very closely to what Joe had to say, and it reminded me, I think my next campaign's bumper sticker is going to read, "Answer the damn phone." And we answered 800,000 phone calls within 40 seconds last year with a live, friendly, professional voice employee of the agency. We pride ourselves on that, and please let me know if folks who are on the phone, if we have a glitch and that kind of customer service is not front and center. We've tried to respect the taxpayers, respond to the taxpayers, get results for the taxpayers, but most of all, it's just restore some confidence in government, that we're competent enough to collect taxes, give refunds promptly, take care of people's concerns and questions, and you know, give the citizens of the state of Maryland the government they deserve. So thank you guys for letting me be on this call and letting me speak very briefly. I do want to applaud the wisdom of all of your clients who are on the phone. I can't think of any point in American political history when it is more important to have professional representation at the state and federal level. We are facing some unbelievable times right now, convergence of unbelievable events. We're going to make it through, and I have some definite ideas as to how Maryland should reemerge, reinvent itself, reimagine itself after the coronavirus pandemic and the current demonstrations that are raging all across the country. I don't want to be depress people, but obviously people know that 612,000 Marylanders in the last 8 weeks have filed for first-time unemployment. We would normally expect about 25,000 in that time frame. We've got 40 million Americans unemployed. We've got a pandemic that is still out there, unfortunately. We've got 107,000 plus deaths from that. We've got a shutdown of our state economy because of the health restrictions that's now beginning to be lifted, but then all of a sudden we had riots and looting and police brutality demonstrations. This morning when I went to the grocery store on my once-a-week shopping with my mask on, the windows were boarded up. The store was open, but and then we have this whole situation in Washington with the tear gassing of peaceful demonstrators, et cetera. So, and then we have the election falling apart in Baltimore City and other areas around the state. So let me just put all that stuff behind us and indicate to everybody on the phone, the genius of the private sector is going to reemerge along with a different, I believe, public perception of what the Maryland government should be doing to be a constructive junior partner. There's going to be a lot of painful stuff this calendar year, but I believe ultimately the state is going to emerge as a different kind of state. I'm going to ask that we have 3 guiding principles in the recovery from everything that I just described. Number 1, does any new policy keep money in the pockets of Marylanders, or does it take more money out of the pockets of Marylanders? Number 2, will whatever policy it is before us, will it make Maryland small businesses better positioned to compete, success, and survive? And most importantly, number 3, whatever policies we adopt after all of this dust is settled, will those policies make Maryland a more attractive place to live, invest, and retire? Those are 3 fundamental questions. If we can get our state lined up properly with them, I think we can have a new public perception as a state that is friendly to business, still progressive and empathetic and compassionate about our citizens, but fiscally moderate, fiscally responsible, and most of all, good customer service as far as our government agencies. So I didn't mean to go into all of that, but these are extraordinary times. I know you have some specific questions. Brett, let me just reinforce the fact that we're going to do major surgery at the Board of Public Works on the fiscal, well, we've done a little bit on the fiscal year that we're finishing up this month, but starting July 1st, there's going to have to be hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars subtracted from the state budget because of the situation that we have with the pandemic and the subsequent restrictions, public health restrictions on local economy. It's not the end of the world. We did it before back in 2008, 2009, but this is going to be different. This is going to be much more significant, and just underlines again the fact that quality representation, Joe, like you and Brett and others in your company, those are assets that I think your clients are going to benefit from. Let me put it that way.
Thank you.
Let me
Thank
stop
you.
there, Brad, and take any questions you want.
Sure. Thank you very much for those comments. Really appreciate your leadership and your insight on these three guiding principles and the customer service. As a citizen of the state, always appreciate when good government is happening. And we have a wide array of clients on the call, small, medium, and large-sized businesses, and we've have a few questions, and I'll dive right in there. You referenced 2008 before. It was a tutorial for some forward-thinking businesses. They understood that the state needed goods and services, the recession notwithstanding. Revising their business plans and efforts, they competed as first-time vendors for state contracts. And Joe and I saw that significantly from our client base, really moving from mostly within the legislative process to a pretty strong balance of having clients who wanted to do business with the state. The question is, how will the reduction of state revenue as a result of COVID-19 affect state procurement, and maybe how can you compare that between what we saw in 2008 and what you might project going into today?
Okay, 2008 was painful. We cut $1 billion out at this time of the year in 2009 in one Board of Public Works meeting. That was a real-time reduction in spending. Unlike other states, we have the ability with the governor and the treasurer and myself to vote in real time to reduce any state agency's budget by 25% when the legislature is not in session. That is a very valuable tool because it gives a lot of confidence to the rating agencies in New York that we can handle whatever fiscal situation we're in. And but I think what we did in 2009, as painful as it was and difficult as it was, is going to be a picnic compared to what we do probably later in July and August of this calendar year. We cut $121 million at the last board meeting before the most recent one. That was really just kind of window dressing, fiscally speaking. We're going to have to cut more on June 17th at the board meeting, but once we're in the new fiscal year, the governor and the legislative leaders are going to have to agree on some major surgery. So I don't know what the impact will be, other than that agencies are going to have a lot less money to spend generally. And once again, I think for your client base, it's very, very important to be obviously heard at the, that old expression in Annapolis, American Joe, that we used to have, which is if you're not at the table being listened to, you may end up being on the menu.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So it's really just a testament to the asset that professional representation brings at this time. I can't give you any specifics because I'm going to take my lead generally from the governor, who I assume is working with the legislative leadership. But is it going to be a hurricane with a tornado on top and a lot of lightning and thunder and stormy weather? Yes. And I don't take any pleasure in that, but I suggest that it gives us a chance to reorganize our thinking about what kind of state we are. This would be, out of necessity in part, but also because I think we've allowed ourselves to be viewed nationally as a state that's high tax, high regulation, unfriendly to business, unfriendly to middle-class retirees through our tax policies and our just general approach towards fiscal matters. And I think what you're going to see by the end of this calendar year is a much leaner state budget I don't think that necessarily means everybody has to run for the hills as far as their own sectors. I think there's still a lot of opportunity for readjusting where money is spent. We fundamentally are a wealthy state, so I think there's a lot of pushing and pulling that's going to occur. But obviously, overall, there will be less money available.
Yeah, definitely some very, very difficult times ahead. That in part answers the second question dealing with the mandates, legislation that mandates over 83% of state tax revenues be spent on certain programs. And you said that you have the flexibility to do up to 25% while not in session. Do you expect that that's enough? I mean, do you have any sense for that at this time, or is it premature for that calculation?
Well, the mandates, most of them should be removed. I don't have clean hands on this. I spent 20 years in the legislature on the Appropriations Committee, as Senator Matuszewski has mentioned, and I participated in many of those mandates. It essentially is a power game between the legislature and the governor, and it's gotten out of hand in the sense that now a vast majority of the state budget is governed by mandated spending. That's got to change. Those mandates need to be re-examined, reconfigured, recalibrated. It's just not going to happen. There literally is not going to be money to pay for the mandates. So I'm not involved in that right now. That's mostly a battle between the governor and the legislature. But common sense would dictate that we really significantly reduce the mandated spending by the legislature. It's not that I I was there. I did a lot of that. It's well intentioned. It's just right now not affordable and not fiscally smart. So, but I'm not in the hand-to-hand combat that will ensue once we begin to do that. But overall, conceptually, this concept of mandated spending by the legislature has gotten way out of control.
Thank you for that response. Kind of taking a more narrow dive into some industries. Client asks about capital improvement plan, CIP, design and construction projects, kind of being the foundation for the state's economy and growth. Is there any, obviously there are going to be some cuts, but is there any sense of kind of priority as to whether design and construction projects would be, further down the line, or is there any sense of how that might?
I'm just, that's a little too much down in the weeds for me right now, because literally I'm going to look to the governor and the legislative leaders because of the significance of the operating fund, budget cuts. As far as capital projects, I think there's a lot of opportunity for creative use of debt. I happen to be a supporter of these P3 programs where the private sector is partnered with the public sector in some of the larger projects. So to the extent we can move some of our operating funds into supporting our debt opportunities for moving forward, I'm happier with that in the sense that capital spending is much more controllable than operating fund revenues, as you guys know. So as far as, is that the question, or did you have a question about manufacturing also? I'm vaguely
Yeah, the manufacturing was on the Client asks, they've seen a few states like Missouri consider additional incentives for companies interested in expanding or starting a domestic manufacturing presence in the state related to life science products and the related supply chain. Given the interest in domestic manufacturing, is the state of Maryland considering additional economic development incentives for new or expanded local manufacturing? I guess when this is the state considering, I guess it's more, what is your view on that? Do you have any thoughts in that space?
Well, I think that's entirely legitimate question, but it's above my pay level, and I'm sure the governor and legislative leaders would be interested in all of that. I don't have anything specific that I'm working on, other than that I'm a resident of Montgomery County, and the life sciences along Route 270 corridor are a huge asset for the state of Maryland. And I think for the future of the state, we should be supportive of the new technologies that are going to be coming in. As far as tax credits or tax breaks or incentives, don't really think we're going to be in a position to offer competitively incentives that are going to be meaningful, other than a kind of change of the state's perception around the country, which right now is, unfortunately and somewhat unfairly, we have a poor image as far as any kind of new economic investment in our state. So that needs to change. I think it can with partly, obviously, I have an alliance with Governor Hogan on a lot of fiscal issues. I don't think these are Democratic or Republican ideologies necessarily. I think it's just we've gotten sloppy in how we handle the state's relationship, the public side with the private side. We've allowed the state to be viewed as, the government is kind of in the front directing everything, and the private sector is in a secondary position trying to kind of figure out all the rules, regulations, and taxes that the state is passing for well-intentioned programs. And instead, what it should be is the private sector, you guys who have the scale to create the wages and the jobs that our people need, you should be out front. State government and county government should be a constructive junior partner to helping you guys compete in the new world. And are we having a new world? Yes. And are you guys going to have to be nimble and creative as far as dealing with the post-pandemic and post-whatever it is, Trump era that we have as far as the economy and politics? Yeah, we're going to have to change and make adjustments. But you guys on the economic side are going to be making most of the adjustments. We, I think, in government should view ourselves as, as I said, constructive partners helping out where we can. Obviously, we still have to regulate and we have to engage in government actions. But right now in Maryland, I would say we've got things back asswards, I guess. We've got things upside down.
Appreciate
we need to get things back in the proper perspective.
Yes.
So what is the next question, Brett? These questions are a little complicated for me, but go ahead.
You're doing great. You're doing great. I can tell you, I imagine the people on the phone call really appreciate the concept of government being a junior partner to business. That is, I'm sure, resonating well with people. It sure does for me and Joe. Shifting gears into the alcohol realm, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the old and outdated alcohol regulations have been modified to better recognize how people shop during this time. Do you see a possibility in a future post-COVID-19 landscape where people will be able to buy beer and wine in grocery stores?
Yes, and I think that's going to happen. once again, I mentioned customer service in government and the importance of, responding and getting results and communicating with the public. Same thing with convenience of consumers. We have a consumer-driven economy of about $380 billion GDP annually, and most of that is consumer spending. So why wouldn't we be in favor of consumer convenience as far as purchase of beer and wine in grocery stores, which I believe 38 other states permit? We have stood in the way of that. I'm from a public convenience, consumer convenience perspective in favor of that, but we'll see how that all carries forward. I think that right now in Maryland, we have a lot of economic protectionism that's been built into our current alcohol industry. And to the extent we can, without damaging the current folks, modernize the state's alcohol laws and regulations, I think we would be more in keeping with what's going on around the rest of the country. I think the pandemic has given us an opportunity to do that. I asked the governor to allow direct ship. I asked the governor to allow curbside delivery of not just beer and wine, but also mixed alcohol drinks and also home delivery. And all of these have been executed with very smoothly, without any problem of underage drinking or competition with retailers or distributors. None of the kind of the folks in the alcohol industry that have always said those customer convenient practices would be harmful to them. None of that has occurred. So one bright light of the pandemic might be that we continue the governor's executive orders and make permanent the temporary modernization of the state's alcohol laws. But that does not include the grocery store issue. That's a little radioactive and a little bigger one, but I think it's going to happen one way or the other, and we probably should accelerate it.
Great. Thank you for that response. If we have time,
and I'm the chief alcohol regulator in the state. Although the legislature claims that they've ripped it away from me as of July 1st of this year, but everyone should stay tuned because, well, put it this way, nobody's moved anywhere. Everyone's still right there in my agency, and as far as I'm concerned, I will continue to be the chief alcohol regulator for the foreseeable future.
Excellent. Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions.
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, great. Given the current unprecedented state of the world, the country, and the state at this time, are there things that businesses can do to help Maryland get back to where we used to be? We are a mid-sized IT business that has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and have continued to maintain our operations, but are concerned over the long-term ripple effects of the economic health for the state of Maryland.
Yeah, no, that you should not. If you can make it through the next 6 to 12 months, I think we're going to usher in a new era of prosperity, both in the country and in this, but particularly in the state of Maryland. Our proximity to the federal government is a huge asset, as you know. We predicted economically, our experts predicted there'd be a 22% drop off in our withholding income tax revenues at the beginning of the pandemic because of all the shutdown of the economy. To everybody's shock and surprise within our agency who were making these predictions, not only did it not go down 22%, it went up. And the only explanation is because of the stabilizing effect of two salary families who have federal government jobs. So The state, I believe, is very well poised in the recovery from the pandemic shutdown to do very well. The question is, who can get through and survive before they go extinct? So tech companies, if they can figure out with the federal and state relief programs and their own innovation and entrepreneurship, figure out how to stay alive through the immediate future, there's a very bright future, I believe, awaiting folks in the state of Maryland, because we have strong economic bones. The problem is, out of the 140,000 small businesses that we have in this state, those that are in the hospitality and tourist or restaurant business, half of them are going to, we predict, not survive because there's no revenue coming in. They can't figure out the federal or state relief programs, and they essentially have laid off all their employees and made personal decisions not to open up again. So I would say that as we open up the economy, hopefully under careful incremental measures, we're going to have some real casualties. But a technology company, I do not think would be one of them, or I certainly hope not. The other folks that we're going to lose, our folks are estimating that the 612,000 people who filed for first-time unemployment, and I'm not sure what the numbers are today. This is the filing date for another week, but we are estimating that half of them will never find jobs again. So that's mostly in the restaurant and tourism, refreshing, bars, and et cetera. That's just a very depressing situation that I have not really heard what the proper state response should be at this point, but it's going to be pretty dramatic.
Indeed. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have. We really appreciate your time, especially in such a busy situation here. And Joe, you want to leave off with some closing?
And I want to say it's been a pleasure knowing you all these years and serving with you and watching you move up through government, and just keeping the 3A rating for our bonding. And I just think that that's an amazing lift that we've been able to maintain. And I know you've been a big part of that. And again, the people in your office are just top drawer. I can't say enough about it. And thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Stay safe. I hope the best for your family. And to everyone that's on the line, please stay safe, be well, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody. I'm signing off. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.